My little sister used my credit card to book first-class honeymoon tickets, so I reported the fraud. Minutes before takeoff, police pulled them off the plane. Okay, buckle up, because I have a story that, even now, makes my blood run cold. Can you even imagine your own sister, the one you've always looked out for, stealing your credit card to book a lavish, first-class honeymoon, only for them to get dragged off the plane by the police? Yeah, that happened. And trust me, that was just the tip of a very, very deep iceberg of drama. I'm 27, and honestly, I've always been the responsible one. My parents, Edward and Dina, raised me to be self-sufficient, to take care of my money. I work hard. I save every penny I can, and I absolutely hate debt. So, this whole mess with my younger sister, Bonnie, who's 21, and her husband, Daryl, also 21, it blew my mind. Bonnie and I were never those siblings who were pitted against each other. No golden child dynamic or anything. But we were so different. She was always the life of the party, the bubbly, outgoing one who could charm anyone. People just loved her. She had this uncanny ability to talk her way out of anything, to get exactly what she wanted. And for years, it worked. Every single time. But that charm, the thing everyone loved, it had a seriously dark side. Bonnie was terrible at taking responsibility. Things went wrong. Someone else's fault. Trouble? Blame. Lie. Manipulate. I'd seen her use that sparkle to get away with so much, dodging responsibilities, bending the truth, getting people to do her dirty work. She just expected others to clean up her messes. Despite all that, I tried. I was the older sister, the responsible one, and I tried to guide her. Even if I felt like I was the only one who saw through her act, I never truly turned my back on her. Even when she disappointed me, or made choices I totally disagreed with, I tried to be there, offer advice, help, whatever I could. Then she met Daryl, and things shifted. I didn't have an issue with Daryl himself, not really. But Bonnie was rushing everything. I just had this nagging, uneasy feeling. Daryl was nice, but he had nothing going for him. No job, dropped out of school, zero motivation. Bonnie, she didn't care. All that mattered was how he made her feel. They were living in this bizarre, self-made bubble of fantasy. When Bonnie announced she was pregnant earlier this year, my parents were floored. They loved Bonnie, but they knew these two had no idea how to support themselves, let alone a baby. So, they laid down the law, no financial handouts. It was time to grow up. Bonnie hated it, but she had no choice. Soon after, they decided to get married. My parents were skeptical, thinking they were way too young. But with a baby on the way, they hoped the marriage would push them to finally get serious. I didn't hold out much hope. Daryl, to me, always seemed like a guy who'd rather blame the world than actually fix his own problems. After the wedding, Bonnie started talking about their dream honeymoon. Europe. Multiple cities. It sounded like a total fantasy, and I didn't take her seriously. They had no money, so I figured it was just talk. Maybe a cheap weekend camping trip if they were lucky. Then, a few days ago, my world turned upside down. I got an email from my credit card company about suspicious activity. At first, I thought spam, but something made me log in. And what I saw, I was completely floored. Thousands of dollars in charges I didn't recognize. Airline tickets, hotels, travel agencies, all for premium flights, fancy hotels, luxury tours. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Bonnie and Daryl, they had somehow gotten my credit card info and planned their dream European honeymoon. I racked my brain. How? Then I remembered. A couple months ago, Bonnie had borrowed my wallet to grab something from a store. I hadn't thought anything of it. But now, it was crystal clear. She must have taken a picture or written down the details. I felt so stupid, so naive. The sheer audacity of it. This wasn't just a few small charges. They were going all out. First-class flights, expensive hotels, multiple countries. They weren't just scraping by. They were living it up on my dime. I called the credit card company immediately, reported the fraud. They were helpful, said they'd start an investigation, but warned me it could take weeks to resolve. My card was frozen. Just like that, thousands of my hard-earned dollars gone. It was heartbreaking. All that effort, all that saving, just vanished. Then came the day they were leaving. Bonnie had asked me to come to the airport to say goodbye. It felt a little weird, since I'd just seen her at the wedding. But I agreed, wanting to show support, send them off. When I got there, everything looked picture perfect. Bonnie and Daryl, all smiles, matching luggage, looking like they stepped out of a luxury travel magazine. They seemed way too put together, especially considering their financial black hole. Designer bags, dressed to the nines. The whole vibe just screamed wealthy vacation. But I kept quiet. I didn't want to ruin their moment. I snapped a few photos of them in front of their gate, playing along like it was the best day of their lives. And then they started talking about it. The European honeymoon. The multiple countries. And something clicked. Was it the extravagance? The fact that just days ago they were complaining about not affording basic things? It all just fit. It was them. There was no doubt left in my mind. Still, I said nothing. I waved them off, told them to have a good time, and walked away. A perfectly normal goodbye. Or so it seemed. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. It was Bonnie, sobbing. I didn't understand anything at first. Just frantic, choked-up cries. All I could make out was that she'd been kicked off the plane and escorted away by the police. I was completely shocked. Her flight had been delayed, and just as it was about to depart, the cops showed up. They told her and Daryl they couldn't fly. It sounded like a nightmare. They were taken off the plane, told to leave the airport. Something about their tickets was wrong. Fake? Shady purchase? Whatever it was, the cops were involved. But here's what actually happened. I inquired a little and found out. They were escorted off because I had blocked my credit card. The tickets they bought through the travel agency? The payment never went through. The agent had been calling them for days, and they just ignored it. So, finally, the agent called the police. Bonnie begged me to come pick them up from the airport. She was frantic, screaming about how unfair it was, how she didn't know what was going to happen. But as she pleaded, all I could feel was this was her mess. And she expected me to fix it. Honestly, I felt no responsibility. Whatever happened, it was their fault. They had to deal with the consequences. I told her I couldn't help. I calmly explained that I wasn't involved, that it wasn't my problem to solve. I wasn't about to get caught up in their mess. The call ended with her still crying, but I stood firm. Since then, Bonnie has bombarded me with messages and calls, all of them blaming me for not helping. She's furious. She's trying to guilt-trip me into doing something now. But I really don't think I did anything wrong. I didn't get involved in their decisions, and I'm not about to bail them out of the trouble they created. She keeps saying, "I'm your sister. You should have helped." But it's not my job to fix everything for her. She and Daryl made their choices. Now they face the consequences. Update 1. The reckoning okay. So remember that call where Bonnie was sobbing? Well, after all that, I was even more certain they were responsible for the fraudulent charges. So, I pushed the credit card company hard. They investigated, and sure enough, they confirmed it was Bonnie and Daryl. They said they were going to report them to the authorities and take them to court. For a second, I wavered. Family, right? I asked the credit card company to hold off for a few days. I talked to my parents. They were incredibly disappointed in Bonnie and Daryl, but they understood why I had to do what I did. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only right one. Bonnie and Daryl stole from me. I couldn't just let them get away with it. Even Daryl's parents were on my side. They didn't defend what their son had done. Everyone in the family was upset, but we all knew this couldn't be ignored. So, I told the credit card company to go ahead. And go ahead, they did. When Bonnie and Daryl returned home after their honeymoon mess, instead of having spent 2 weeks in Europe, they'd spent most of their time in court. It seems they hadn't learned much from the initial debacle. They used my credit card without permission, and after all the trouble, I just couldn't let it slide anymore. The court case was quick. The judge ruled they wouldn't go to prison, which honestly surprised me a little, but I guess it's common for these types of cases. However, they were hit with a massive $25,000 fine. $25,000. They were supposed to pay for what they did. But here's the kicker. Neither of them had that kind of money. Not even close. Both had dropped out of college. With no real education or solid jobs, there was simply no way they could ever come up with that fine. And what really made everything worse? Their own parents refused to help. They were left to deal with the mess entirely on their own. Bonnie and Daryl ended up working 3 jobs each, just to try and make enough to live and chip away at that fine. They couldn't afford rent, so they ended up moving into my parents' basement. Not ideal for anyone, but at least they had a roof over their heads. Bonnie kept calling me after all this, trying to convince me to forgive her, to let everything go. She pulled the "we're family sticks together" card over and over. She begged me to forget about the stolen credit card, to just move on, to be there for her like nothing had ever happened. But I couldn't. I just couldn't pretend. If Bonnie had asked for help in the past, I would have been there, as I always had been. But stealing from me? That was a line I couldn't ignore. She made a choice, and now she had to deal with the consequences. I told her I couldn't help her anymore. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me just because we were sisters. She probably expected me to cave. She kept texting, kept calling, detailing how much they were struggling, how hard it was. She even promised to repay me if I just gave them a chance. But I had no intention of forgiving. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about trust. She had shattered it, and I couldn't just let it go. She needed to understand there were consequences for her actions. For a while, I kept my distance. Didn't answer her calls, didn't respond to her texts. I know it must have hurt her, but I had to stick to my decision. Bonnie and Daryl had to learn. They had to figure out how to make things right on their own. Things were undeniably tough for them. I saw how hard they were working, trying to pay off the fine. They were doing whatever they could, but it was a losing battle. It felt like they'd be stuck in that situation for a long, long time. I wasn't sure if they'd ever get out of it, but it wasn't my job to fix it. I had to ensure Bonnie and Daryl understood that stealing from me was unforgivable. I know some people might say I should have forgiven her, that I should have just let it go. But for me, it wasn't that simple. I didn't want to turn my back on my sister, but I couldn't just act like everything was fine when she had done something so incredibly wrong. At this point, I don't know if Bonnie and I will ever be the same. She might have hoped I'd come around, but I don't think that's happening. The future of our relationship is totally up in the air. For now, I'm standing by my decision. Update 2. Minnie enters the chaos then. Bonnie gave birth a few months ago to a baby girl, Minnie. And things, somehow, got even more complicated. My heart just breaks for Minnie. She's completely innocent in all this. My parents and I have been doing our best to give her a stable, loving environment. But Bonnie, her actual mother, seems more focused on herself than on her own daughter. Bonnie hasn't been working since Minnie was born, and I've noticed she's just not that concerned about her. At first, I thought it might be postpartum depression, but no, that's not it. Bonnie isn't sad. She isn't struggling. She's living her life exactly as she did before the baby came. Her friends are always over, gossiping and chatting about everything but what actually matters. While they're having fun, Minnie spends most of her time with my parents, who have truly stepped up. Bonnie's 21. I get it. At that age, you want to have fun, hang out with friends, enjoy life. But she has a baby now. Her life isn't just about her anymore. It's about Minnie too. But Bonnie just doesn't seem to grasp that. She's at home with her friends, and while I'm glad she has support, it feels like she's more concerned with how she looks, how she's perceived, and how much fun she's having, rather than actually being the mother Minnie desperately needs. It's like motherhood is just an afterthought to her. And her marriage? Bonnie has barely paid any attention to Daryl. He's been pretty much absent since Minnie was born. In fact, he was barely around for most of the pregnancy. I thought maybe, once the baby was here, he'd step up. I was wrong. He's been blaming everything on Minnie, saying having a child ruined his life. The way he talks about her, it makes me sick. He's been living somewhere else, and no one even knows exactly where he is. He doesn't answer Bonnie's calls, or his parents. He's just disappeared. He's only visited Bonnie and Minnie a handful of times since the birth, and each time, he seemed completely uninterested. It's like he doesn't even care about his own child. It's so frustrating because as much as I want to help, Bonnie just doesn't seem to realize she needs to take responsibility. Minnie is her child, and she has to be there for her. It's so hard to watch Bonnie get away with not being present while my parents are practically raising her child. At first, I tried to be understanding. I thought maybe Bonnie was just going through a tough time. But after months of watching her, I've come to the conclusion she just doesn't care as much as she should. She's still living her life, thinking everything will just work out. But Minnie deserves more than that. The saddest part is they both seem to have abandoned Minnie. My parents are the ones doing most of the work. Feeding, diaper changes, playtime, all of it. And while I'm so grateful they're doing so much, it shouldn't be them. It should be Bonnie and Daryl. But neither of them seems interested in being real parents. Bonnie did make an effort in the beginning, but as soon as her friends started giving her attention and she could focus on herself again, Minnie's needs went right out the window. I'm not saying she doesn't love her daughter. I'm sure she does. But love isn't enough when you're a parent. Being a parent means putting your child's needs first, and Bonnie simply isn't doing that. I've tried talking to her, tried to make her see what's happening. I've told her being a mother means taking responsibility, that she can't just live like nothing has changed. But Bonnie just brushes it off, continuing to live exactly how she wants. Every time I try, it feels like I'm the one being too harsh. She just says she'll figure it out. But that's not enough. I can't just sit back and watch her neglect her own child. At this point, I've decided I have to step up, whether Bonnie likes it or not. I can't keep watching her make excuses while Minnie suffers. It's hard to admit, but Bonnie is failing as a parent. The truth is right in front of me. My parents are doing so much, and I've been helping too, but there's only so much we can do if Bonnie doesn't step in and actually take responsibility for her daughter. I don't want to hate Bonnie. I don't want to say she's a bad person. But her actions make it impossible to deny that she's not the mother Minnie needs right now. She's young, sure, but that doesn't excuse her ignoring the responsibilities that come with raising a child. Minnie deserves a stable, loving environment, which she's not getting from her parents. Daryl, meanwhile, is gone. Vanished. It's been months, and I don't see him coming back. It's like he's abandoned both Bonnie and Minnie, and I don't know how he lives with himself. I never expected him to be perfect, but this level of absence, it's heartbreaking. He's just chosen to ignore his child. So here we are. My parents are stepping up for Minnie, but they shouldn't have to. Bonnie should be doing that. She should be there for her daughter, not just focusing on herself. I've been doing what I can, but I can't carry this weight forever. She needs to realize it's time to grow up and be the mother Minnie deserves. Update 3. The unthinkable happened, alright. So you know how Bonnie was barely paying attention to Minnie? Well, get this. She went back to work even earlier than expected. And her reason? She said she was bored and had nothing to do. Nothing to do? She has a newborn baby. But she was so consumed with her own life that she genuinely couldn't see the responsibility she had at home. Not that Minnie was neglected, mind you, because my parents were basically raising her. So, Bonnie probably felt like she could just slot back into her old routine. She wasn't grasping the fact that she was a mom now, with real responsibilities. It really bothered me to see her so uninterested. I get it. She's young, probably didn't expect her life to change this drastically. But still, the way she handled it felt so wrong. Her focus should have been Minnie, not trying to escape the reality of being a parent. Oh, and Daryl? He actually showed up again. Everyone, for a fleeting moment, thought maybe he was finally here for Minnie. But then something happened that shocked me even more. Despite the mountain of debt they were in, that $25,000 fine looming over their heads with only a year to pay it off or face jail time, Bonnie and Daryl went on vacation. They took the money Daryl had somehow saved up and just went away. They completely ignored the court order, the fine, the threat of prison. They just spent their money on a trip, acting like everything was perfectly fine. They had zero regard for the consequences. It was like they were living in this bizarre bubble, pretending their problems didn't exist. So selfish, so reckless. When they returned, things only got worse. Bonnie and Daryl suddenly started acting like they were concerned about Minnie. Bonnie went on and on about how much she missed her darling baby. It felt so fake. I could tell she wasn't genuinely worried. She just wanted to look good for my parents. It was so clear that, until then, they had actively avoided any real responsibility for Minnie. They were acting like their lives hadn't been completely messed up, like they were still the same couple who had everything figured out. But my mom, who had been doing so much for Minnie, had finally reached her limit. She told Bonnie, very clearly, that if she wasn't interested in being a mother to Minnie, then maybe she and Daryl should give my parents full custody of the baby. I didn't expect Bonnie and Daryl to agree, but to my absolute surprise, they did. Just like that. It was almost like they were relieved to let go of the responsibility. They didn't want to take care of Minnie anymore, and giving up custody seemed like the easiest way out. They agreed with barely any hesitation, and everything happened so fast. It didn't take long for the legal process to go through. 1 minute, Minnie was Bonnie and Daryl's child, and the next, she was legally my parents' child. They had taken full custody. It was official. I didn't expect everything to happen so quickly, and honestly, I was a little taken aback. It felt rushed, like no one really stopped to think about the long-term effects. It was confusing and a little disappointing to see how quickly Bonnie and Daryl had just given up on Minnie. I talked to my mother after the custody change. I wanted to know why they pushed it so fast. My mom explained that it wasn't about punishing Bonnie and Daryl. It was all about Minnie's well-being. She said Minnie deserved a stable, loving home, which Bonnie simply wasn't providing. My mom explained that she and Dad had been doing most of the childcare anyway, so it only made sense for them to legally take over. I understood her point of view, but it still felt rushed. It was hard to see everything unfold this way. I thought that maybe Bonnie would finally step up after everything that happened. I thought she'd realize how much she had to lose, that she'd get her life together for Minnie. But she didn't. Instead, she and Daryl remained completely focused on themselves. After they gave up custody, Bonnie didn't even seem upset. She was more focused on having fun. She went back to work, hanging out with her friends, doing things that were all about her. Minnie was truly an afterthought. So now, Minnie is with my parents. And Bonnie and Daryl are living their lives, seemingly without much concern for their daughter. I know they made their choice, that they didn't want the responsibility of being parents. And I understand that Minnie is better off with my parents, truly. But the whole situation still feels wrong. I can't help but wonder if there was more I could have done, or if I was too harsh in the way I handled it all. But then I look at Minnie, happy and thriving with my parents, and I know, deep down, this was for the best. Some people just aren't meant to be parents. And sometimes, the only thing you can do is protect the innocent ones caught in the crossfire.